We thought we knew the Shedeur Sanders draft story. Turns out, we didn't know half of it. Cam Newton just dropped a bombshell that changes everything about Sanders' fall to the 5th round.
My source tells me that it wasn't just the Baltimore Ravens. It was 3 teams: the Cleveland Browns, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it also was Baltimore Ravens.
Apparently, it was never just about one team. And there's a whole other side to the story with twists and turns. Let me break down what really happened. The bombshell revelation that shook the NFL. On September 17, 2025, former NFL MVP Cam Newton dropped an absolute bombshell on his 4th and 1 podcast that left the football world stunned. In what can only be described as one of the most revealing segments in recent sports media history, Newton didn't just confirm the already shocking report about Shedeur Sanders rejecting the Baltimore Ravens, he completely rewrote the narrative by revealing that Sanders had actually turned down not 1 but 3 teams on the same day during the 2025 NFL Draft. According to Newton's unnamed source, the situation involved not just the Ravens, but also the Philadelphia Eagles and ultimately the Cleveland Browns.
My source tells me that it wasn't just the Baltimore Ravens. It was 3 teams: the Cleveland Browns, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it also was Baltimore Ravens.
Let me paint you a picture of just how unprecedented this revelation truly is. We're talking about a 5th round draft pick, a player who had already fallen dramatically from his projected top 10 status, somehow managing to exercise the kind of leverage typically reserved for established superstars. The sheer audacity of it is breathtaking, and the implications for how we understand player empowerment in the modern NFL are staggering. To fully appreciate the magnitude of this story, we need to understand the context that led to this moment. Shedeur Sanders entered the 2025 NFL Draft as one of college football's brightest stars, projected as a top 10 pick after a prolific career at Jackson State in Colorado, where he amassed over 10,000 passing yards, 99 touchdowns, and a 69.3% completion rate. But as we now know, his draft experience would be anything but conventional. The story actually began to unfold several days earlier when ESPN's Adam Schefter dropped his own bombshell. On September 14, 2025, Schefter reported that the Baltimore Ravens were preparing to take Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round with the 141st overall selection, but Sanders' camp conveyed he preferred not to be in a situation where he's backing up Lamar Jackson. This initial report was already shocking enough. After all, we're talking about an organization with a proven track record of developing quarterbacks, led by one of the most respected coaching staffs in the NFL. But Newton's revelation 3 days later completely shattered our understanding of what had transpired on that fateful April 26 draft day. The scope of Sanders' draft day maneuvering was far more extensive than anyone had imagined, with all 3 teams expressing intent to select Sanders around picks 141, 150. What makes this story even more compelling is how Newton positioned his revelation as a direct response to what he saw as incomplete reporting from mainstream media. Newton argued that by only reporting partial information, the media was fundamentally misrepresenting the truth.
If you only report some of the truth and not all of the truth, you are, in some cases, if not all cases, just as guilty as telling a lie. Because if you only have a certain amount of information that you're pulling from, it clouds your perspective.
This wasn't just about correcting the record. It was about holding the media accountable for what Newton perceived as a fundamental misrepresentation of Sanders' character and motivations. The former MVP was essentially arguing that by only reporting the Ravens angle, the media was inadvertently painting Sanders as someone who was simply too good for Baltimore, when the reality was far more nuanced and frankly, more respectful. The timing of Newton's revelation was also significant. His 4th and 1 podcast episode titled Cam Finishes Gilly, Shedeur's 5th round reality, and Joe Flacco Stinks was released on September 17, 2025, and within 72 hours, the Sanders segment had amassed over 1.2 million views across X, Instagram, and TikTok. The viral nature of this revelation speaks to just how hungry the football world was for the complete truth behind one of the draft's most shocking slides. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. Newton didn't just reveal the additional teams, he provided context that completely reframed Sanders' decision-making process. Rather than portraying Sanders as an entitled player making demands, Newton painted a picture of a young man showing remarkable respect for established stars while making calculated business decisions about his future. According to Newton's source, Sanders had profound respect for both Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, recognizing that he would need these elite quarterbacks to get injured for him to see meaningful playing time.
My source tells me that Shedeur had too much respect for Lamar Jackson, had too much respect for Jalen Hurts, and he would be in a situation where he would have needed that individual in Lamar and Jalen to get hurt in order for him to have an opportunity to play.
This framing is crucial because it shifts the narrative from one of arrogance to one of strategic thinking. We're not talking about a player who thought he was too good for certain teams. We're talking about someone who recognized that his path to meaningful playing time would be significantly different depending on where he landed. The Ravens' angle makes perfect sense when you consider Lamar Jackson's status. At just 28 years old, Jackson is a two-time MVP in his absolute prime, having just completed a 2024 season with over 4,500 passing yards and 35 touchdowns. The Ravens' quarterback room was stable, with Jackson locked in as the franchise quarterback through 2027 and performing at MVP levels. For a young quarterback looking to develop and eventually compete for a starting role, backing up Jackson could mean years of clipboard holding with minimal game action. The Eagles situation, while less corroborated by mainstream media, follows a similar logic. Jalen Hurts was locked in through a 5-year, $255 million extension signed in 2023 and had just posted a 2024 stat line of 3,900 passing yards, 28 TDs, 8 INTs, and 600 rushing yards. At 26 years old, Hurts was entering his prime years with no indication that the Eagles were looking for a replacement anytime soon. This brings us to a crucial point that Newton emphasized repeatedly throughout his revelation: the concept that not every financial opportunity represents the best career move.
All money ain't good money, and every opportunity is not really a great opportunity for where you are or what your vision is.
This philosophy represents a significant shift in how we think about player development and career management in the NFL. Traditionally, young players, especially those drafted in later rounds, are expected to be grateful for any opportunity and to pay their dues regardless of the situation. But Sanders and his camp were operating under a different philosophy, one that prioritizes long-term career trajectory over short-term stability. The social media reaction to Newton's revelation was immediate and polarizing. Within 72 hours, the story had generated over 40,000 posts with hashtags like #Shedeur snubs and #businessdecision. The response split along predictable lines. Some fans admired Sanders' agency and business acumen, while others viewed his actions as entitled and short-sighted. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it reveals the changing power dynamics in the modern NFL. We're seeing a generation of players who are increasingly willing to take control of their own narratives and career paths, even if it means taking significant risks. Sanders could have easily accepted a spot with either the Ravens or Eagles, learned from elite quarterbacks, and developed within stable, successful organizations. Instead, he chose uncertainty with Cleveland, betting on his ability to compete and ultimately win a starting job. Newton emphasized that sometimes making the best decision for yourself requires standing alone, even when others disagree with your choice.
You have to do what's best for you, even if nobody agrees with it. That's something that you have to live with.
The implications of this revelation extend far beyond Sanders himself. We're potentially witnessing the emergence of a new paradigm where even late-round picks feel empowered to influence their destinations. This represents a fundamental shift in the traditional power structure of the NFL draft, where teams have historically held all the leverage. Now that we understand the bombshell nature of Newton's revelation and its broader implications, let's see exactly how each team's pursuit unfolded and why Sanders' strategic calculations may have been more sophisticated than anyone initially realized. The team-by-team breakdown and strategic analysis. To truly understand the magnitude of Shedeur Sanders' draft day maneuvering, we need to dissect each team's situation and the strategic calculations that led to his unprecedented decision to turn down multiple NFL organizations on the same day. What emerges is a complex web of organizational dynamics, quarterback development philosophies, and career trajectory planning that reveals just how sophisticated modern player management has become. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens, the team whose interest was first reported by Adam Schefter and later confirmed by Newton. The Ravens entering the 2025 NFL Draft held 7 picks, including the number 141 selection in the 5th round, which they viewed as a sweet spot for high-ceiling projects who could marinate behind their established core. This wasn't just about filling holes, it was about sustaining a perennial contender through strategic developmental picks. The Ravens' approach to quarterback development is legendary in NFL circles. Under GM Eric DeCosta's philosophy of best player available with fit, Baltimore has produced stars like Joe Flacco and has been instrumental in Lamar Jackson's evolution evolution from a 2018 first-rounder to two-time MVP. When you consider that Jackson posted a 2024 season with 500-plus passing yards and 35 touchdowns while being just 28 years old, it becomes clear why the Ravens viewed Sanders as a long-term investment rather than an immediate contributor. But here's where Sanders' thinking becomes fascinating. Newton acknowledged that the Ravens' organizational excellence made Sanders' rejection all the more puzzling on the surface, given their proven track record of developing elite quarterbacks.
Now, this is where the perspective gets skewed, because you ask the question, why would Shedeur not want to go to Baltimore? For all the obvious reasons and all the optics that Alex Smith has stated. If any team has been on the cutting edge of saying we figured out the recipe of drafting and developing good players to play great and elite, that's one of the teams that does it at a high level.
Newton understood the Ravens' excellence while explaining Sanders' reasoning. The decision wasn't about disrespecting Baltimore. It was about recognizing that those situations wouldn't provide the developmental opportunities Sanders was seeking. Internal evaluations within the Ravens organization had Sanders slotted as their number 4 QB on the board, behind consensus prospects like Cam Ward and Quinn Ewers, but ahead of raw athletes like Jalen Milroe. The Ravens saw Sanders' potential, particularly his pocket poise and accuracy on intermediate throws, 68.5% completion rate in 2024, but they were planning for a 2-3-year developmental timeline that Sanders' camp found unacceptable. The communication between Sanders' camp and the Ravens reveals the professionalism on both sides. According to sources, around 2:28 p.m. on draft day, agent David Mulugetta's camp signaled no interest, citing Sanders' aversion to a multi-year backup role amid Jackson's prime. This wasn't a dramatic rejection. It was a business decision communicated respectfully and efficiently. Moving to the Philadelphia Eagles, Newton outlined how the situation there was remarkably similar to Baltimore in terms of having an established elite quarterback who commanded respect.
The second team, Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts has been nothing less than a model citizen. And of course, he's thinking to himself like, you're talking about development, you're talking about preparing him to be a potential starting quarterback.
The Philadelphia Eagles angle of Newton's story is perhaps the most intriguing because it lacks the corroboration that the Ravens story received from mainstream media. The Eagles entering the 2025 NFL Draft were coming off a 12-5 season in 2024 with quarterback Jalen Hurts locked in through a 5-year, $255 million extension signed in 2023. At age 26, Hurts was the undisputed centerpiece, having posted impressive 2024 numbers: 3,900 passing yards, 28 TDs, 8 INTs, and 600 rushing yards with 12 scores. The Eagles' draft priorities, as outlined by GM Howie Roseman in pre-draft pressers, centered on bolstering the trenches and secondary. With 5 picks, including number 145 in the 5th round, the Eagles targeted edge rushers, cornerbacks, and offensive line depth. Quarterback wasn't a screaming need given Hurts' durability and the presence of Kenny Pickett as a competent backup. But here's where Roseman's history becomes relevant. Roseman has a track record of drafting QBs for trade value, as evidenced by the Carson Wentz selection in 2016, who was later flipped for picks. Could the Eagles have seen Sanders as a high upside developmental arm who could later be moved for assets? The lack of mainstream media corroboration for the Eagles' interest raises questions, but Newton's source insisted they were among the 3 teams vying for Sanders. Newton emphasized that both Baltimore and Philadelphia represented no-brainer developmental situations, making Sanders' rejections all the more noteworthy.
Might I add, these are individuals that is a no-brainer.
Then came the 3rd team in this unprecedented saga, the Cleveland Browns, where Sanders ultimately landed.
The 3rd team was the Cleveland Browns. And this is what I will add to this. As a man in the United States of America, as a man in the world that we live in today, no matter what country, no matter what city, no matter what state, no matter what county, no matter what zip code you stay in, you have to do what's best for you, even if nobody agrees with it.
The Browns situation represents the most fascinating aspect of this entire saga because it's where Sanders ultimately landed. GM Andrew Berry orchestrated a minor but pivotal move-up in the 5th round on April 26, 2025, swapping picks with the Seattle Seahawks to secure Sanders at number 144. The trade cost Cleveland a 6th round pick, number 189, and a 2026 7th rounder. Minimal assets for a quarterback with franchise potential. Berry's rationale for targeting Sanders was rooted in the Browns' quarterback instability. Heading into the draft, Cleveland's quarterback situation was a patchwork of veterans and unproven youth following the disastrous end of the Deshaun Watson era. The Browns had signed 40-year-old Joe Flacco as a bridge starter and drafted Oregon's Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, but neither represented a long-term solution. What made Cleveland attractive to Sanders was the opportunity for competition. Unlike Baltimore and Philadelphia, where he would be buried behind established stars, Cleveland offered a clearer path to playing time. The Browns' depth chart featured the aging Flacco, the inexperienced Gabriel, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, none of whom presented insurmountable obstacles to a talented young quarterback. Newton explained that Sanders' fundamental desire was simple. He wanted to go somewhere he could actually play football, not just hold a clipboard.
Anybody in the NFL draft has this consistent thought. I want to go to a team that I can do what, Peggy?
Play.
I want to go to a team that I could do what, Peggy?
Play.
The timing of these communications reveals the sophistication of modern draft day operations. Newton's narrative suggests that all 3 teams were in play during the 5th round, with Sanders' camp making rapid-fire decisions as the picks unfolded. The window between picks 141, 144 represents roughly 30 minutes, during which Sanders' agent David Mulugeta would have fielded multiple calls and conveyed his client's preferences. This kind of real-time negotiation requires extraordinary preparation and clear decision-making criteria. Sanders and his camp had clearly established their priorities. Immediate opportunity trumped organizational prestige. This represents a fundamental shift from traditional thinking, where young players are expected to be grateful for any opportunity with successful organizations. The role of Deion Sanders in this process cannot be understated. As Shedeur's father, mentor, and de facto career strategist, Deion wielded significant influence in shaping the draft decisions.
Now, why I mention all that is because Deion Sanders seems to have passed on some of his confidence to his son. And through many NFL sources, it's basically concluded that teams didn't choose Shedeur because maybe he was a little too confident. Maybe his father's a little too confident. And a couple of NFL teams' words, it felt like Shedeur was choosing us. Not we were choosing him.
His March 2025 comments about certain teams being off limits had already signaled that the Sanders family would be selective about Shedeur's destination. Newton's framing of Sanders' decision-making process as respectful rather than arrogant is crucial to understanding the broader narrative. The decision wasn't about disrespecting Baltimore or Philadelphia. It was about recognizing that those situations wouldn't provide the developmental opportunities Sanders was seeking. The reaction from NFL analysts to Newton's revelation was mixed but telling. Some, like Alex Smith, called Sanders' decision incredibly short-sighted, arguing that learning from established stars in stable organizations would have been more beneficial than competing in Cleveland's dysfunction. Others praised Sanders for betting on himself and taking control of his career trajectory. As we'll soon see, the long-term implications of Sanders' unprecedented draft day maneuvering extend far beyond his individual career, potentially reshaping how future prospects approach the draft process and changing the power dynamics between players and organizations in ways we're only beginning to understand. The aftermath and long-term implications. The immediate aftermath of Cam Newton's revelation about Shedeur Sanders turning down multiple teams created a media firestorm that exposed deep philosophical divisions about player agency, organizational authority, and the evolving power dynamics in professional football. But the real story lies in what this unprecedented situation reveals about the future of the NFL draft process and player empowerment at all levels of the league. In the days following Newton's September 17th podcast, social media became a battleground of opinions that reflected broader cultural tensions about entitlement, respect, and business acumen in professional sports. The story generated over 40,000 posts, with hashtags like Shedeur snubs and business decision, with sentiment analysis showing a 55% pro-Sanders, 35% anti-Sanders, and 10% neutral split. This division wasn't just about football, it represented different philosophies about how young professionals should approach career development. The pro-Sanders camp, led by voices like Newton himself, framed the decision as smart business acumen. Newton revealed that Sanders' commitment to proving himself was so strong that he was willing to risk going completely undrafted rather than accept a situation that didn't align with his goals.
My sources also tell me this, Peg.
What's up?
Going back to draft day, there was a thought that Shedeur had. I want to go somewhere to prove myself, even if it comes at a cost of being undrafted.
No.
And as a man in this world that we live in, you have to make the best decision for yourself, even if nobody else agrees with it.
This perspective positions Sanders as a young man who understood his worth and was willing to bet on himself, even if it meant risking going undrafted entirely. The willingness to potentially forego an NFL opportunity altogether to find the right fit demonstrates a level of conviction that's rare among draft prospects, particularly those who have already fallen from their projected draft position. On the other side, critics like former quarterback Alex Smith viewed Sanders' decisions as fundamentally flawed. Smith argued that falling to the 5th round should have been a reality check that changed Sanders' expectations about immediate playing time.
I think this is insane, right? Like, if this is true, I think this is crazy, right? At this point, you're in the 5th round. I understand you had higher hopes, but you've dropped to the 5th round, and you're thinking about being a starting quarterback the next year.
Smith's criticism reflects traditional NFL thinking that struggling organizations like Cleveland represent inferior development opportunities compared to stable, successful franchises. He emphasized that the Ravens represented the gold standard of organizational stability and quarterback development.
If you're in this situation, you want to go to an organization that is going to develop you, right? Here you have the Baltimore Ravens, the model of stability in the NFL. This regime's been together for how many decades now? And actually has a track record to develop quarterbacks. Joe Flacco, Lamar.
But Newton's reporting suggests that Sanders' decision-making process was more sophisticated than critics acknowledge. The revelation that Sanders showed too much respect for established stars like Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts reframes the narrative from one of arrogance to one of strategic career planning. Rather than believing he was too good for certain teams, Sanders recognized that his development path would be fundamentally different depending on his landing spot. The role of agent David Mulugeta in orchestrating these draft day communications cannot be understated. As a top agent known for aggressive client advocacy who has represented stars like Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts, Mulugeta's strategy emphasized avoiding situations where Sanders would be buried behind entrenched starters. This approach represents a broader trend toward more assertive representation in professional sport. The timing of Newton's revelation, coming 3 days after the Browns' 17-10 loss to Baltimore in Week 2, added another layer of intrigue to the story. Sanders had spent that game-running scout team mimicking Lamar Jackson's scrambles in practice while remaining inactive for the actual contest. The irony wasn't lost on observers that Sanders was preparing his new team to face the quarterback he had refused to back up. Newton, ever the prognosticator, predicted that Sanders' opportunity in Cleveland might come sooner than expected, given the Browns' struggles and Joe Flacco's limitations.
I think a lot of people are going to get opportunities when you see a situation where they're 0-2. It's like, are we going to keep allowing a Joe Flacco, who's not the future, to still take the helm if we're 1-6?
Yeah.
Dylan Gabriel, hey, bro, you up. Shedeur, bro, you're going to get your opportunity.
As of September 20th, 2025, Sanders remained buried on the Browns' depth chart as the third-string quarterback behind Joe Flacco and rookie Dylan Gabriel. His preseason performance had been impressive, 26/35 for 267 yards and 2 TDs across 3 games with an 82.4 PFF grade, but he had yet to see regular season action. This reality provided ammunition for critics who argued that he would have been better served learning behind established stars. However, Sanders' situation in Cleveland also validated his strategic thinking in some way, with Flacco struggling to a 58% completion percentage and 1.3 TD-NT ratio through 2 games, and the Browns sitting at 0. 2. Sanders' opportunity for meaningful playing time appeared to be approaching faster than it would have in Baltimore or Philadelphia. The long-term implications of Sanders' draft day decisions extend far beyond his individual career trajectory. We're potentially witnessing the emergence of a new paradigm in NFL draft strategy, where even late-round prospects feel empowered to influence their destinations. This represents a fundamental shift in the traditional power structure, where teams have historically held all the leverage. From a business perspective, Sanders' approach makes considerable sense when viewed through the lens of modern athlete career management. His 4-year, $4.2 million contract with Cleveland includes performance incentives worth up to $500K for significant playing time, money he would be unlikely to earn sitting behind Jackson or Hurts. The financial opportunity cost of accepting a backup role with limited development prospects could be substantial over the life of his career. The reaction from NFL front offices to this kind of player empowerment remains mixed. Some executives view it as a concerning trend that could complicate future draft processes, while others see it as a natural evolution of player agency in a league where careers are short and opportunities limited. The precedent set by Sanders could encourage other prospects to be more assertive about their preferred destinations, particularly those with strong representation and family support. Deion Sanders' influence throughout this process cannot be separated from the broader narrative. His public comments about certain teams being off limits, and his role as both father and advisor gave Shedeur a level of support and guidance that most prospects lack. This family dynamic provides a blueprint for how future prospects with influential parents might approach the draft process. Newton's advice to Sanders moving forward emphasized the importance of being prepared for whatever opportunity might arise, drawing parallels to other late-round success stories.
So my message to Shedeur Sanders will be this: stay ready so you don't have to get ready. When you think about the Tom Brady's of the world, when you think about the Kurt Warners of the world, when you think about the Dak Prescotts of the world, when you think about the Brock Purdy's of the world.
The media's handling of the story also reveals broader issues with how complex narratives are reported and consumed in the modern sports landscape. Newton's criticism of incomplete reporting, his assertion that revealing only part of the truth is equivalent to lying, highlights the challenges of accurately portraying nuanced situations in an environment that rewards quick takes and viral content. Looking ahead, Sanders' career trajectory will serve as a crucial test case for this approach to draft strategy. If he eventually wins the starting job in Cleveland and develops into a successful NFL quarterback, it will validate the wisdom of prioritizing opportunity over stability. If he struggles or fails to reach his potential, it will provide ammunition for critics who argued he should have accepted a developmental role with a more established organization. The broader implications for future draft classes are significant. We may see more prospects, particularly those with strong representation and family support, attempting to influence their draft destinations through similar tactics. This could lead to a more complex draft process where teams must consider not just a player's talent and fit, but also their willingness to accept the role being offered. Newton concluded his analysis by reinforcing that Sanders' approach, while unconventional, represents the kind of self-advocacy that can define successful careers.
Stay ready, bro. Matter of fact, and this ain't even to Shedeur, any young player, stay ready. Because just because one team think you're trash, you may be the missing piece or the treasure to another team.
Yeah.
Ask Baker Mayfield.
Okay.
The Sanders saga ultimately represents more than just one player's unusual draft experience. It's a window into the evolving relationship between individual agency and institutional authority in professional sports. As Newton emphasized throughout his revelation, the decision to prioritize personal vision over conventional wisdom requires courage and conviction, regardless of whether others agree with the choice. Whether Shedeur Sanders' unprecedented draft day gambit will be remembered as a masterstroke of career management or a cautionary tale about overplaying one's hand remains to be seen. What's certain is that his willingness to turn down multiple NFL teams on the same day has forever changed the conversation about player empowerment in the modern draft era. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.